I worked the night shift at a McDonald's in the rough part of town. People came in drunk, high, or just pissed off at life. Most of the time, they're harmless. They are just looking for something to eat before crashing. But every now and then, someone walks in who makes you rethink everything. That night, it was her. She stormed in just before closing. Tall, built like she could lift a car, and with a look that told me I was already dead in her eyes. Her 3 kids trailed behind, all under 10, all silent. They didn't whine, didn't run around. They just watched. That was the first thing that set me off. Kids don't act like that unless they've learned the hard way not to. She slapped a receipt onto the counter so hard I flinched. "You messed up my order." I took the receipt with shaking hands. The order was simple. 10-piece nuggets, large fries, 2 Happy Meals, and a Big Mac. Standard. What's wrong with it? Sauce is missing. Fries are cold. Burgers wrong. I started to apologize, but she cut me off, slamming her fist on the counter. "You think sorry is gonna fix this? I paid for food, and you gave me trash. Give me my money back. No, give me double my money back. I've eaten something I didn't want because of you. You need to repay me." The restaurant was empty except for one guy mopping in the back. The rest of the staff were hiding in the kitchen, probably hoping I'd handle it. I glanced at the register. Just give her the food and get her out. I grabbed fresh fries, a new burger, and extra sauce. She didn't take it. "You didn't hear me. Are you deaf? I don't want replacements. I want respect." I felt my stomach drop. "I'm just trying to make it right." She laughed. It wasn't amused. It was the kind of laugh that meant something bad was about to happen. Before I could react, she reached over the counter and grabbed my wrist, squeezing so hard I felt my bones grind. "You think I'm playing with you?" I yanked my arm back, heart pounding. The guy mopping froze. The kitchen door creaked open, but no one stepped out. She picked up the cash register like it weighed nothing and threw it. I barely ducked in time. The metal box crashed behind me, spilling money everywhere. The sound was deafening. The kids didn't flinch. She vaulted over the counter like she'd done it 100 times before. I scrambled back, knocking over the fry station. Oil splashed onto my pants, burning my leg. I bit back a scream. Her fist came at me fast. I barely managed to turn my head, but it still clipped my jaw. My vision blurred. My body hit the floor hard. Before I could get up, she grabbed me by my shirt and lifted me like I weighed nothing. "Where's your manager?" "Not here. I'm the last one. It's late." "Then you're the one who's gonna pay." She slammed me into the counter. My ribs screamed. I gasped for air. I reached for anything, a tray, a cup, anything to fight back, but she was too fast. Another punch, this time to my stomach. I collapsed. I tried crawling away, but she kicked me in the ribs, hard. Pain shot through my body. I heard something crack. One of the kids finally spoke. "Mom, stop!" She ignored them. She grabbed a handful of my hair and dragged me to my feet. "You don't serve trash, you understand? You don't disrespect people who pay." I could barely see. I wanted to fight back, but my body wouldn't move. I knew deep down if I didn't do something, I was going to die in this fast food restaurant over a missing sauce packet. She shoved me into the ice cream machine. The metal corner dug into my back. Cold seeped through my uniform. My hands found a metal scoop. Without thinking, I swung. It hit her temple. She stumbled back, eyes wide. I didn't wait. I ran. I bolted through the kitchen, knocking over trays, slamming through the back door. The alley was empty. My breath came in ragged gasps. My side throbbed with every step. I didn't look back. The door behind me exploded open. She was coming. I ran toward the street, waving my arms at the first car I saw. They swerved around me and kept going. She grabbed me from behind, spinning me around. "You think you can just leave?" I drove my knee into her stomach. It barely fazed her. Her fist hit my jaw again, and I hit the pavement. My vision went black for a second. I tasted blood. I tried to crawl, but she stepped on my hand, grinding it into the asphalt. I screamed. The sounds of sirens filled the air. She turned, looking at the approaching lights. Her kids stood by the McDonald's entrance, watching. Just watching. She let go, walked away like nothing had happened. The police swarmed in, guns drawn, yelling orders. I sat in the back of the ambulance, barely able to hold the ice pack to my face. The cops had her in cuffs, shoving her into the back of a squad car. She didn't resist. She just stared at me through the window. I don't know if she was smiling or if my vision was too messed up to tell, but I knew this wasn't over. The kids got put into another car. None of them cried. None of them said a word. A paramedic asked if I wanted to go to the hospital. I shook my head. I just wanted to go home. The next day I quit. I didn't even go back for my last paycheck. I didn't want to see that place again. Didn't want to wonder if she'd get out, if she'd come back. I watched the news waiting for updates. Nothing. No name, no follow-ups, like it never happened. But I remember how strong she was, how her kids just watched, how she looked at me like I wasn't even human. And every time I hear a customer complain about a missing sauce, my hands start shaking. Because I know what people are capable of over the smallest things. Hey guys, we noticed that only a small portion of you are subscribed to the channel. If you really enjoy our stories, please follow us and like the video. It's free and it really helps us a lot to keep growing. We upload videos daily and interact a lot with our community, as we upload stories that you recommend us, and once a month, we upload your own stories. And to those of you who are already subscribed, we appreciate all your likes, comments, and your constant support. You are as much a part of SSG Animations as we are. And now, back to the video.
My name is Ryan, and I work at a rundown Wendy's on the outskirts of the city. Every night is the same old routine. Cooking, talking to people, and washing. I don't mind routine, but that night was different. That night, someone came looking for me. Someone I didn't know, but who was convinced that I had ruined his life. It was a quiet night like any other. The restaurant was nearly empty, just a few customers eating at the tables and a couple of cars in the drive-thru. I was cleaning the register when a man walked in, tall, thin, with a vacant but intense stare. He didn't look like a regular customer. He walked straight to me, ignoring the counter. He stared without blinking. He didn't seem tired or angry. He seemed broken. It was you, wasn't it? I stayed silent. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I felt that my best option was to play along. The man placed his hands on the counter. His knuckles were white from gripping so hard. You slept with my wife! I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I was confused, not just because I had never slept with anyone who had a partner, but because I had never seen this guy before. His face, his voice, his presence, none of it was familiar. I would have remembered him if I had. I don't know what you're talking about, man. Don't lie. I know what you did. His voice was trembling slightly, not with sadness, but with something worse. Something that felt like an earthquake about to begin. I tried explaining that he had the wrong person, but he wasn't listening. That's when I realized something terrifying. This man wasn't just convinced that I was his enemy. He was completely detached from reality. And worst of all, he didn't even seem to have a wife. Things escalated in seconds. I raised my hands to calm him down and told him that if he didn't leave, I'd call the police. That was the trigger. The man slammed his fist on the counter so hard the register jumped. Then he grabbed a sauce dispenser and threw it against the wall, splattering ketchup everywhere. A customer screamed. My boss, who was in the kitchen, poked his head out to see what was happening. The security guard, a big guy named Mark, rushed over. "Sir, you need to leave, right now." The man didn't even look at him. Suddenly, he spun around and punched Mark in the face. Mark dropped to the floor like a sack of bricks. People screamed and ran for the exit. The guy didn't stop. He climbed over the counter as if it wasn't even there and entered the employees' area. One of the cooks tried to stop him with a spatula, but the man grabbed a knife from the counter and pressed it against the cook's neck. "Back off." His voice was a whisper, but it carried a terrifying weight. The cook immediately dropped the spatula and raised his hands. I took the chance to run for the back door, but the man saw me and followed. I shoved the door open with all my strength and sprinted into the parking lot. I thought I had a chance to escape, but I was wrong. I heard something whistling through the air. A knife flew past my head and embedded itself into a car hood. I froze for a second. Then I heard footsteps. Fast. I ran, but he caught up to me. He grabbed my shirt and slammed me against my car. Before I could even get my senses, he slammed me again. "You can't run from this. Face what you've done." His grip was vice-like. He threw me into the pavement so hard I felt my ribs rattle. My hands scraped against the asphalt as I tried to get up, but he was already on me again. He climbed on top of me and started smashing my head against the ground. Each impact sent shockwaves through my skull. The world blurred. I knew that if I didn't do something, I was going to die. I struggled, but his grip was too strong. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Mark and the cook were running toward us. They tackled the guy, knocking him off of me. I gasped for air and rolled away, trying to get my bearings. But the man was unnaturally strong. He broke free almost immediately and grabbed his knife from the ground. "You shouldn't have done it!" He lunged at me, blade raised. I barely dodged, stumbling backward. I turned and ran, my heart pounding. He chased after me, yelling nonsense about his non-existent wife. We reached the main road. Cars rushed past, headlights blinding me. I had no plan, just one thought. Keep running. I darted across the street without looking. Tires screeched. A truck barely missed me. I made it to the other side and turned to see the man still coming, until a car slammed into him, sending him flying. He hit the ground hard, but didn't die. He twitched, groaning in pain. People gathered around, some yelling for help, others filming. I stood there, panting, unable to believe it was finally over. The police arrived minutes later. They arrested him, though it took 4 officers to restrain him. Even as they dragged him away, he kept screaming, "You shouldn't have done it! You shouldn't have done it! You shouldn't have done it!" Later, I learned the truth. He had no wife. He never did. He was a mental patient who had spent his entire life in isolation. Years ago, he had killed his own family and disappeared. No one had found him until that night. They sent him to a psychiatric facility. But sometimes, when I'm alone at the register, I feel like someone is watching me. And I wonder if, one day, he'll come back for me. I know if he somehow escapes, he will.
I live on a quiet street on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. A place where the houses are close enough to know your neighbors, but far enough away that you can't see what they do behind their closed doors. I am an ordinary man. I lead a simple life, and for the past 20 years, I have shared this street with the Codd couple, JT and Christy. They are, or rather, they were the kind of people it's easy to get along with. More than neighbors, we were lifelong friends. But everything changed that day. I hadn't seen JT and Christy in days, which was unusual. They were always outside working in the yard, walking their dog, or just chatting with me in the driveway. I tried to call them, but the calls went straight to voicemail. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I told myself that maybe they had left town unannounced, which would be odd, but not impossible. The days continued to pass, and I became seriously worried. The only sign of life in their house was the constant arrival of food delivery men leaving bags at the door and leaving without anyone picking them up immediately. That made me think that maybe they were sick, too sick to even get up and open the door. After several days, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. Every time I passed in front of their house, my gaze would stop at those bags of food piled up at the door. Christy loved to cook. Why were they asking for so much? Why wasn't she picking up at that moment? One night around 11 o'clock, I watched from my window as another delivery car pulled up in front of the Codd's house. I saw a man get out of the car, leave a bag at the door, and walk away without anyone answering the doorbell. Something about his behavior struck me as odd, as if he was acting mechanically, not waiting for someone to answer the door. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I decided to approach the house. I approached the window trying to catch a glimpse of something inside. The lights were off. No one seemed to be home. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. If something was wrong, I couldn't just ignore it. Not when I had known JT and Christy for so long. I remembered they used to leave a backup key hidden under a flower pot by the back door. It was something they did in case they ever forgot their keys, and since we were lifelong friends, they had also told me about that hiding place. When I got to the back, I bent down and lifted the potted plant. There was the key. As I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the smell. A pungent, putrid stench. It wasn't the smell of spoiled food. I imagined what the smell was from, that it was that of a corpse. I started walking through the kitchen. The bags of food were there, lying on the table, some open, some closed. JT? Christy? I tried to call out to them, but there was no answer. I moved slowly into the living room. Everything was in disarray. There were magazines scattered on the floor, and the furniture was out of alignment as if someone had pushed it in a fight. My eyes caught something on the floor. A dark spot that shouldn't be there. My breathing quickened as I moved closer to see what it was. It was a small spot of blood, dry and dark. At that moment, I raised my head and looked in the direction of JT and Christy's room. The stench was coming from there. I knew what I would find before I went in, but I wasn't prepared to see it. I turned on the light in the room and saw them. There lay JT and Christy. Their bodies were in bed as if they had gone to sleep and never woke up. Only this didn't happen, as they were without sheets. They were mutilated. Their skins were pale and haggard, their eyes open in an expression of terror that almost made me vomit. There was no doubt that their death had been quite violent. I couldn't look away, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I don't know how long I stayed there, but suddenly I heard a noise behind me, something that brought me back to reality. I heard footsteps behind me. The first thought that crossed my mind was to hide, but there was no time. I barely had time to turn off the light and get under the bed. The smell was horrendous. It was as if all the stench of decomposing bodies had accumulated where I was now. The bedroom door burst open, and a dark figure silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. From under the bed, I recognized Robert Owens at once. It was another neighbor, a guy who had always been quiet. I had never imagined him capable of such a thing. But there he was, standing in the doorway, looking down at where JT and Christy's bodies lay. I stood still, holding my breath. I knew that if he found me, I would be dead. Owens moved with an eerie calm, his gaze fixed on the bodies on the bed. Finally, when he was close enough to almost touch me with the tip of his toes, he stopped. After a few seconds, he turned and left. I couldn't stay there. I had to call the police. I started to move slowly towards the back door where I had entered, but I had no such luck. Just as I was about to reach the door, something fell from one of the shelves in the kitchen, hitting the floor with a crash that echoed through the house. I didn't have time to think. Owen's expression was one of murderous fury as he saw me there. I knew I had no choice. I had to fight. Without saying a word to me, he lunged at me with a force I hadn't expected, knocking me to the ground. I felt his hands around my neck, squeezing hard as I struggled to free myself. My hands groped for anything I could use as a weapon. I managed to grab a frying pan that was on the ground, and with all my might, I slammed it against his head. The blow knocked him back, giving me a second to free myself from his grip. I didn't wait to see if he would recover. I lunged at him again and began to hit him. I didn't mind beating him to death, or at the very least, knocking him unconscious. In response, he used his fingers to press them into my eyes. I screamed in pain and stopped hitting him. With my vision blurry, I watched as the man grabbed the same frying pan I used to hit him. Before he could pick it up, I lunged at him again and slammed him into a piece of furniture. All the dishes and the cabinet fell on top of us. Robert still wasn't giving up. He grabbed the pan again and tried to hit me, but we both realized at the same time that he was stuck in the cabinet. As he tried to get out, I used all my strength to stand up and to run away. The next door neighbors came out of the house to see what was going on. They thought it was a domestic dispute, but they didn't expect to see me bloodied. "Call the police! Call the police now!" Terrified, my neighbor's wife took out her cell phone and called the police. I fell to the ground as they came to my rescue. When the police finally arrived, they found me in shock, unable to articulate the words I needed to say. But when the officers entered the Codd home and discovered what I had already seen, the gravity of the situation became apparent to all. Robert Jason Owens went on the run, but was arrested after a brief standoff with police. Today he is still alive, but in prison. The man had brutally murdered my friends and began asking for deliveries so that no one would suspect that they were gone. Later he confessed that he had planned to set them on fire, but the fear of being discovered prevented him from acting in time. Owens will never get out of jail, although what we still regret to this day are the 3 lives of his victims. Yes, you heard it right. It was 3 victims and not 2. Christy was pregnant when she was murdered, even though she was only a few months old. This story is inspired by the crimes of Robert Jason Owens, a murderer from Asheville, North Carolina. In 2015, Owens was arrested for the murder of Christy Showen Codd, her husband Joseph J.T. Codd, and their unborn child. After killing them, he dismembered their bodies and attempted to incinerate the remains. To cover up the crime, Owens placed food orders using the couple's phone to pretend that they were still alive. Robert Jason Owens is currently serving a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole in North Carolina, convicted of murder and destruction of evidence.